Mesdames et messieurs, mes chers collègues, j'espère que
Ladies and
le
gentlemen,
déjeuner a
dear
été
colleagues,
profitable pour continuer les
I hope you enjoyed your
discussions
lunch.
les uns avec les autres. Nous allons donc reprendre nos travaux
We
pour cette
are going to
troisième session
resume
dont le
our
thème
discussion.
porte sur les défis de la souveraineté
The last discussion
alimentaire
will be
européenne.
devoted to
Il
food
a semblé
sovereignty.
nécessaire au Sénat
The
français
French Senate
d'organiser
felt it was
un
necessary
vaste
to
débat sur ce
organize
sujet,
a
tant les
wide-ranging
tendances de fond
discussion
en
on
la
this
matière
topic
nous semblent
because the
préoccupantes.
underlying trends
Chaque jour, les
seem
consommateurs
worrisome to
constatent
us.
une dépendance
Every day,
accrue
European
des
consumers
importations alimentaires sur
observe
fond de
that
compétitivité de leur propre
more and more food is imported into Europe, while at the same time their own agriculture is losing in competitiveness. Additionally, specific examples demonstrate just how difficult it is to ensure that minimum production standards are applied to this imported food of a standard that is required in Europe, or at the same level of exacting this as in Europe. This competition is probably contributing to the abandonment of land use in many European territories, which ultimately threaten our sovereignty. Now, the European Union plays an important role on international markets, but this is being threatened by many players, including Russia. In this context, the war in Ukraine has broken out, where the first and fifth world exporters of soft wheat are the belligerents, which account for altogether 30% of world exports. Ukraine provides 45% of the maize imported into Europe, with an area of production which is in the war zone. This will have significant impact everywhere in the world. Will lead to a serious increase in grain prices, notably in Africa and the Middle East, but also because of the increase in the cost of energy, will weigh on the competitiveness of our farmers through an increase in the price of their inputs. Now, of course, the European Union has got significant production capability, and this will keep it immune to a significant threat against its food security. But it is more and more exposed, and its international positions on the export market are threatened, which is why the Senate felt it was necessary to hold a discussion on this topic. Current events have made it clear that agriculture is a geostrategic priority for the continent. The discussion today is to know how to reconcile independence, autonomy, and food sovereignty with environmental requirements. Before we ask the question right from the start, which is whether the farm-to-fork strategy, which is based on assumptions of production decreases in the years to come on the continent, is it suited, is the question we'll be asking. Does it still suit our purposes? Delighted to be able to discuss this with you here today. And now we're going to hand over to Julien Dive, who will introduce our discussion.
Madame la Présidente, Monsieur
Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen,
pour commencer, je voudrais bien sûr excuser le président Lescure qui m'a demandé de le
bring
suppléer cet après-midi.
the apologies of
La question de
Chairman
la
Lescure,
souveraineté alimentaire,
who could not be with us. Now, food safety is a critical concern
m'y intéresser de près en
of
tant
our
que
time.
rapporteur à l'Assemblée
As the
nationale,
National Assembly rapporteur on the project devoted to France's food autonomy, which I served as a rapporteur, discussed this. We need to harmonize the legal frameworks and open up the discussion regarding NBTs. Now, the parliamentary report on the impacts of the COVID crisis on our agricultural industry, and in that context, it became clear that COVID into sharp relief all the difficulties that we face. The Extraordinary Council of the Agriculture Ministers of Europe, who met on March 2nd, concluded that it was a critical requirement to revive
Souveraineté alimentaire de notre
European
continent
farming.
a pris un temps semblé acquis.
We
Le succès de la PAC y
used
est
to
pour
feel safe
entrée en vigueur en 1962.
within our borders when it came to
Celle-ci visait en premier
our
lieu
food
le
supply.
renforcement de la productivité de l'agriculture
Agriculture was more and more productive, and sourcing was not a difficulty. As our farm models have changed, the common agricultural policy has made it possible for the European Union to become an agri-food power of preeminent status. Now, we are only third among those importing regions of the world. 60 billion euro was the surplus in our trade balance in agri-food. The COVID-19 crisis has revived fears that had receded from view regarding food security. The food chain has been resilient, but dependencies are emerging, particularly in some agricultural industries. The EU imports strategic products from third countries. Plant-based proteins, we import 90% of the amount we require, and 57% of our maize supply comes from Ukraine. A third of our inputs come from Russia. Fertilizer inputs. We need to become more independent and shore up our agricultural and food model. Given the current crisis, the European Union has got to support its agriculture. We are considering using the crisis reserves and offsetting imbalances on the market. We need to work to ensure our food safety, but this will only be possible if we ensure that the playing field is entirely equitable. In every step of the food chain, access to healthy food must be ensured. Between 10 and 25% of imported foodstuffs are not compliant with European requirements. Inspection, control, and reciprocity must all be brought into play. This must be made a high priority. The question of the mirror clauses in commercial contracts supported by several European countries is absolutely critical if we are to prevent the emergence of unfair competition. Reciprocity will have to be increased in the face of these requirements and difficulties. Our food system has got to be made more sustainable, more resilient, and better able to withstand climate change. Our European citizens are in favor of local, healthier, and lower energy-intensive food production. The farm-to-fork strategy calls for a decrease in 50% of plant health products by 2030 and increase in organic farming lands, raising the extent to 30%. Yet, all of these goals are extremely ambitious, and again, reciprocity is a critical part of the solution. We need to support our farmers in these periods of transition. Environmental objectives have got to be reconciled with sovereignty objectives. Ensuring the food autonomy of the EU is a geostrategic, economic, and environmental goal. The European Union must be able to provide local food, healthy and sustainable, which is affordable to its citizens. These challenges are extremely topical, and it is our hope that our discussions today will allow us to make progress in finding solutions. I give the floor to Mr. Norbert-Liens, who is the chair of the Agriculture and Sustainable Development Committee of the European Parliament. Thank you very kindly. Mr. Chairman Norbert-Liens, we're delighted to welcome you here this afternoon, and we're looking forward to hearing your statement, sir.
Ja, sehr verehrte Frau Vorsitzende, sehr geehrter
Madam Speaker,
Herr Vorsitzender, verehrte
Mr. Speaker,
Kolleginnen und Kollegen, möchte
dear colleagues,
zunächst den französischen Senat
first of all, here I would like to thank the French Senate and the French National Assembly and you, Ms. Prima, as chairwoman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Economic Affairs Committee, excuse me, for giving me this opportunity to speak at this Interparliamentary Conference on Strategic Autonomy today. It is a great honor. It is also an amazing opportunity to address issues with you today, such as food sovereignty and our broader strategic autonomy. In last November of last year, you, Madam Speaker, attended the Committee for Agriculture and Regional Development at the European Parliament and took part in one of our meetings. I'm very pleased, therefore, to be able to prolong this exchange of views between our respective parliaments, which I think is a clear expression of our common undertaking, that is to say, to push Europe forward together. Today's conference will deal with one of the most important issues for the long-term challenges facing the EU. That is to say, in the face of President Putin's invasion of Ukraine, it has become more important than ever. And I'd like to thank Minister de Normandie for the important initiatives that the French presidency has taken through the Council. I'm also pleased to announce that last Thursday and Friday at Versailles, the heads of state and government announced that food security was a key priority. Now, together, we have to address solutions to emerge from this crisis. The Ukraine war throws up the issue of dependency on certain regions of the world when it comes to agrarian foodstuffs. Now, we're not just talking about the direct impact of the war on Europe's food supplies, rather on the longer-term overall consequences of the attack. If we look around the world, a number of figures have been cited already, but Ukraine is one of the world's biggest exporters of cereals and as well as plant oils. In 2020, Ukraine was the largest, second largest EU trade partner for cereals, as well as 50% of our sunflower oil and other seed oils come from Russia and the Ukraine. Now, this situation is going to have a huge impact on the global food market. Now, just a few examples concerning cereals. In 2021, 55% of all cereal exports went to Asia, and 51% went to Africa. In Egypt, only in Egypt alone, 45 to 55% of cereal, of wheat used has to be imported, which makes Egypt the world's largest importer of wheat. So when it comes to seeds and sunflower oil, Ukraine is the world's biggest exporter, and the biggest purchasers of Ukrainian sunflower oil are China and India, but of course also Spain, the Netherlands, and Italy. Over 80% of India's need to import sunflower oils is met by Ukraine. What this means very clearly is that we are going to see a very swift increase in retail prices of various foodstuffs. It's obvious, therefore, that the conflict is going to create massive disruptions of the supply chain. A whole number of countries in West Africa, West Asia, Southeast Asia, the supply of cereals, of wheat, of sunflower oil and other seeds is going to create an immediate spike in food prices and thus bring about a worsening of the world hunger problem. However, of a conclusion, the longer the conflict lasts, the more insecure the situation will be for food security, not just in Ukraine, but across the world. Moving back to the EU, the situation in the EU is comparatively comfortable. If you look at the three biggest types of cereals, so barley, corn, and wheat, we are the third biggest producer of those products behind China and the US. One in eight shares of that is exported, but 19% of our cereals come from Ukraine, and a similar proportion of seeds and sunflower oils. In 2021, around 88% of these things were sourced from Ukraine. So oil seeds, different plants and other products are going to rise in price in the EU, despite the fact that we have a target of self-sufficiency of around 100% for all our different foodstuffs. Nonetheless, we should stress that food security is not just a basis for one region or one country. It is a global issue and it affects us all. So the fact that there are wars taking place in Europe means that the whole world food security system is going to be knocked off balance, which means that we are therefore responsible for other regions of the world. Coming on to the second part of my speech, the long-term outlook with regard to the EU's food security and our strategic resilience. Talking about food security, we need to be very clear that we're not talking about living in autarky. We don't want to simply detach ourselves from every other part of the world. Rather, we want to protect free markets and protect them against a crisis of supply. Therefore, we are pursuing a concept of strategic autonomy in the EU. So all those goods which are strategically important, we have to cope with three risks to do this in the future. First of all, dependency on fragile states due to which are unstable for political or economic reasons. Secondly, the need for, or rather, market abuse, competition abuse by a strong partner in the market, and thirdly, climate change, which is going to make the situation more disruptive, more unstable due to extreme weather events, for example, floods and so on, which will mean that the conditions, natural conditions on the planet are going to worsen over time. Now, we also therefore need to increase our resilience. That's part of strategic autonomy. The European food system during the COVID-19 crisis demonstrated that it was resilient. However, the success of this system in combating or overcoming the COVID pandemic consequences created a number of misunderstandings. First of all, in June last year only, the Environment Commissioner for the EU, Virginia, at a meeting of the Parliament's Agriculture Committee, said that they had thrown into question our whole traditional food system. Things like sustainability, biodiversity, and organic agriculture had replaced food security as one of the EU's key priorities, because other challenges have come on stream. Things like obesity, avoiding food waste, and our ecological footprint. The European Parliament, my committee in particular, however, see as the issue of food security as much more important than that. My committee welcomes the Commission's proposal for an emergency plan to cover food security needs. A coordinated, common European response is necessary to all the risks of weighing on our food security. And the only way of the best way of responding and avoiding panic or overreactions on the market by individual markets is to act together as Europeans. The European Parliament has also stressed the need for sustainable agriculture, which combines productivity and resilience of the food system, which are the consequence of a sustainable use of natural resources. On the basis of those general principles, the EP's Agriculture Committee has drawn up a list of measures in order to overcome the current crisis. The three key points in this list are as follows. First of all, review the EU concept for food security and the dependency, in order to reduce the EU's dependency on agricultural commodities. This is particularly important for products which, due to the Ukraine exporters being interrupted, such as cereals, as I said, and seed plants. This is the most a critical point. All common, ongoing and future legislative proposals need to be reviewed against that optic. Second point, the need for greater strategic independence in Europe. We've been talking about this for years, but not done anything about it, and the situation in Ukraine will only make it worse. Therefore, in the short term, temporarily, in my view of my my committee, we have to allow the use of particular fertilizers in order to increase our own production at home. That would give us greater flexibility in the national strategy plans which are being put in place in order to increase the amount of agricultural land for arable land and plant growing, in particular crop growing. We all need to take all that fallow land and put it to service, mobilize it in order to enable agriculture and crop planting on that land, in particular for plant proteins. That means that every ton of wheat more we get in the EU this year is not just an extra ton for food security and to prevent hunger in the world. It's also another 1 ton more against Putin, 1 ton more on the for freedom and democracy. Third point. Immediate measures to combat market distortions. Article 219 has already been mentioned by one of the earlier speakers, and that means we need to deploy the €500 million agricultural reserve fund, which, if it's used in a targeted way, can help those who are most hard hit by this crisis. Now, despite these measures not yet being implemented, the Commission, in my view, has made some progress. Last Thursday, for example, there was a kick-off meeting for the new European Crisis Management and Reaction Rapid Response Group in order to discuss the impact of the war in Ukraine on food security. In this context, the Agriculture Commissioner, Rucikovsky, will be speaking to us at the Agriculture Committee, and I believe that between now and then, we will have a Commission plan put to us. I think that this is, I would say very seriously, this situation is a crisis, and it will remain one. Those 3 points then on the overall situation and the EU's approach and the contribution of the EP's Agriculture Committee, I believe that, I hope that has given you a basis for a lively discussion this afternoon. Of course, I will be happy to respond to all the comments you may make this afternoon. Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, thank you very much once more for giving me the opportunity to speak at this conference, and of course I will be very happy to see you once more, I hope soon, in Brussels in one of the meetings of my committee. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Colleagues, on that note, allow me to open this third debate. I would suggest it be organized in the way we had this morning. That is to say, each member has a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, a bit more than in the second session. Now, the first speaker is Mr. Wisniewskis from the Lithuanian Parliament, followed by Mr. Montaugé from the French Senate.
Thank you, dear Madam Chairman, dear colleagues. For a few years, we have been discussing how to carry out green transition to a cleaner, healthier, and more self-sustainable Europe. The world without fossil fuel, artificial fertilizers, with less soil erosion and more biodiversity in rural areas. We sought those goals for the sake of humanity and our planet. Those goals are still important, and all the commitments must be kept. But on the 24th of February, Putin invaded Ukraine. The same day, just a few hours after Russian invasion, I heard revived voices who called on suspension of the Green Deal and those vital commitments for more sustainable Europe. These voices are very wrong. If we are honest with ourselves and our electorates, we must keep our promises and green the direction. But of course, we need solution to those food and energy crises which are endangering our continent. I would like to suggest some kind of solution for this. Let's look to Ukraine. What is Ukraine for Europe? It has always been, it still is, and could be in the future our breadbasket. Ukraine produces 11% of the world wheat, 16% of barley, 15% of maize, 16% of rapeseed, 50% of sunflower oil. If not for this war, Ukraine could produce more of all these goods, and this is more than enough for our continent. So if we want to solve all those problems with food prices and even food shortage in some European countries, we must help Ukraine in its defense against invaders. This solution could be the fastest and most effective. So our help for Ukraine is the help for ourselves. How we can help Ukraine? I do not doubt that Ukrainians will fight Russia till the last centimeter of their soil. They have the courage and will need to fight this battle and win. Our job is to give them means and more reason to fight. We must remember that 8 years ago in the Maidan Revolution, people died, and they died under the flag of European Union. They died with the idea of the membership in EU in their minds and the vision of European Ukraine in their hearts. Then they died in hundreds. Now they are dying in thousands. People of Ukraine are dying because they want to be part of the West, part of our union. It's the main reason why they are fighting, and this is the reason why they will win this war. I have no doubt. We must help them and encourage them to come to us, to Europe. We must recognize that we need Ukraine, and the food crisis is a proof of that. If we want to help, we must give Ukraine EU membership perspective. So, dear colleagues, from countries that are blocking this decision, please change your mind. Neither we nor Ukraine have a lot of time. We need decision now, and those decisions could be the solution for all the Europe. We have chance to retrieve a breadbasket of Europe, not to waste this unique chance. And in the end, I would like to thank French colleagues for this conference and for all the work you're doing for Ukraine and for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Franck Montaugé.
Thank you. The next speaker is Franck Montaugé, followed by Ms. Caligiuri from Italy. Mr. Montaugé. Madam Speaker, Mr. Linz, Mr. Div, dear parliamentarians, for our ancestors, it would have been unthinkable and strange to talk about food security, and yet it has become a major source of concern. With 2 years on from the pandemic starting, now with the Russia waging war on Ukraine, history will have shown us, Europeans, the geostrategic importance of food as a factor in peace and solidarity. That is, let's say, the EU as that. Your common agricultural policy is not an old-fashioned policy, although it goes back many years, because it covers many issues in a number of areas, such as food security, food quality, the environment, local development, energy, and indeed health of our fellow citizens. This crisis shows us, Europeans, how lucky we are to have diverse and high-performing agriculture, which is always improving, but which is too ill-paid too often, with costs too high for farmers, and who are much of the time not understood by the rural world, not understood by the urban, and so on. Now, these issues need to be dealt with, but first of all, immediate measures need to be taken in order to overcome the difficulties created by the war in Ukraine, which is going to result in a drop in production for certain producers or price rises for consumers. We are going to be facing a major food crisis if we do not respond in that way. Now, would it not be helpful to take a counter-cyclical temporary measure to redirect the CAP policies elsewhere in order to we also need to strike a balance between food production and the needs and energy production. We need to think of strong, effective short-term action to stockpile strategic foodstuffs. What is the Commission's negotiating position when they work with the WTO in the context of the current crisis? What is the policy for food subsidies for the poorest Europeans? And lastly, what budgetary policy can we expect at European level to implement the vital sustainability strategy, Farm to Fork as it's known, which should not be abandoned? What then, beyond the CAP, the 2023 Common Agricultural Policy going forward, what is the Commission's ambition to make agriculture one of the solutions to the structural and cyclical issues we're facing, whilst maintaining the EU's strategic autonomy when it comes to food and health? We need to take tangible action to show that European agriculture is a priority today and tomorrow, and a priority which is geopolitical in nature. That's what we are expecting the French presidency to come up with during its presidency of the EU, and what I expect from the Commission as well. Thank you. Right, thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Caligiuri from the Italian Senate, followed by Mr. Djenkac from the Croatian Parliament. Thank you.
Grazie. Thank you. Thank you, Madam President and President of the Agricultural Mission Colors. I'd like, first of all, to say how close we feel to the Ukrainian people and to the Ukrainian Parliament. And I'd like to thank the French Presidency for having organized this meeting. This is a period of great difficulty for the agricultural world, which nevertheless has shown great resilience. So the same sector has to face major challenges from the new CAP and also the ecological transition. So we need to find new systems and find the right system in terms of labelling. This could help to contribute to defend and protect the different productions. And we also have to work on the digital traceability and blockchain. So the health pressure due to the COVID pandemic doesn't help us to meet these challenges. The geopolitical instability, which has led to increased prices in energy and raw materials, could destabilize the food production systems. So the distribution chain has been forced to act. Now, all this may undermine the economic efforts made. So for the first time in decades, the rules and objectives of the European system need to be reviewed. So I think it is a good opportunity to assess and develop a strategy to support the agricultural and energy sectors of Europe, as well as the possibility to fix maximum levels of energy prices. In this respect, I think it is crucial and also necessary to motivate and encourage farmers to produce those products such as soft wheat, and for which all member states are not all self-sufficient. So we should apply the principle of solidarity amongst the member states. This could be a true support to the agricultural difficulties, which is a great strategic sector. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'd like to hand the floor to Mr. Jenkacz, and then Mr. Robert Telos from Poland.
Madam President, dear hosts, ladies and gentlemen, the experiences and consequences of the two-year health crisis affecting our citizens and the threat posed by it, along with rising energy prices and agricultural costs such as transport, livestock, labor, and other agricultural inputs, require a strong and solidary Union response. The European Green Deal, Farm to Fork strategy, and the EU biodiversity strategy have set high ambitions that require the transformation of the agri-food sector. The fear of our farmers about the impact of such ambitious green goals on food security and supply should be taken seriously. We should use all available tools in order to reconcile the needs of stakeholders in the food supply chain, high European standards of food safety and health, but also harmonization of food standards, both for food produced in the Union and imported into the Union. Turning to sustainable production has its price, and it will not be good if we transfer this burden only to farmers without ensuring market recognizability of their products and without providing support that will alleviate the pressure to achieve the planned goals. That is why we need measures for crisis management in the food sector, and we need more ambitious measures for resolving market crises, both those caused by price and those caused by climate change. This should not be done only through the Agriculture Fund, but also through other European funds. In this regard, we welcome the intention to convene an expert group within the European Food Security Crisis Preparedness and Response Mechanism. By setting a favorable framework that will ensure strong reciprocity of norms and rules for European and other agricultural producers, which will not affect food security and will not violate European agricultural sovereignty, we must strive to prevent unfair trade practices in the food supply chain and raise the profile of European products. The key will be to strengthen consumers' confidence in European products, which can only be achieved through joint activities of all stakeholders in the agri-food sector. Short food supply chains prove to be the fastest supply route with the smallest environmental footprint at the beginning of the health crisis. Therefore, these chains need to be upgraded in the future, and farmers should be encouraged to unite and thus increase the range of products offered. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'd like to apologize for Robert Tellis from Poland. He wasn't authorized to come today. I want to give the floor to Andres Minish from Austria, from the National Council. And then to Celso Delgado from Spain, from the Congress of Deputies. Mr. Minic.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues here at the Paris Senate. We have the safest, healthiest food in the world at present here in Europe. In the current context, with very high input costs due to high energy prices, that's going to make things difficult. Russia's war against Ukraine has already been stressed by a number of previous speakers in the breadbasket of Europe. This will have huge impact on the global situation when it comes to food. It's therefore of particular importance for us that the Green Deal, which is of vital importance for the future of agricultural policy, and that our fallow or set-aside policy be suspended for a specific period, temporarily. We need to act now in order to ensure security of supply of foodstuffs, in order that other regions of the world are not themselves exposed to fresh warfare and famine. This is a stupendous moral responsibility on us we need to live up to. And so I would like to thank the organisers for their invitation and for the logistics of this very important conference, because it is really addressing some of the key topics of our time: food security and in particular boosting the amount of plant-based proteins we produce in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I hand the floor to Mr. Celso Delgado and then to Brian Ledin. Thank you very much, and thank you very much. The war in Ukraine is a serious risk to farming and livestock, and also the fishing sector in Europe. So this sector was already damaged due to the energy prices, which have soared. And diesel, electricity, everything that's needed to irrigate and to make this sector function, corn, wheat, and fertilizers, amongst other things, are being seriously impacted by this problem. And now in this situation, the European Union must take measures which are quite exceptional, so that because this situation is itself exceptional. So it's necessary to work together to achieve European strategic autonomy from a diplomatic and point of view. But in terms of food safety, Spain contributes to this food autonomy. Now, we must, in our opinion, we need to review the strategies for the food sector of the European Union. We need to be more flexible in terms of those sectors. Amongst other things, we suggest that we should recognize the strategic nature of these agricultural products. So the import conditions need to be made more flexible. So import corn from third countries. We also have to make more flexible some of the technical requirements for imports. But of course, this has to be approved and has to respect the food safety standards. So we agree with Robert Lynch. So we have to authorize more land area for cultivation within the European Union. We have to have greater areas for growing crops, and we We also think that we should approve measures to avoid any disruptions in the supply chain, alternatives to imports from Ukraine, as I said, such as corn and other products. And we need to activate mechanisms that are part of the CMO in order to support those sectors which are most impacted. And above other things, measures to provide direct aid to the CAP for the new scenario. And so this means we need to act because the situation is urgent. So this can have impacts on other countries in Africa and Egypt and others. So we need to be sensitive to the situation, but we do need to take care of European agriculture and the fishing sector as well. And this is also part of our food chain. But today, fishermen can no longer go out to fish because the price of energies have doubled for them. And so this makes it inviable for their activity. If we want to guarantee food sovereignty in Europe, we also have to tackle the fishing issues as well. Thank you. Thank you very much. The floor goes to Brian Ledding from Ireland, and then to Lorenzo Viviani.
Monsieur Ledding, afterwards.
Mr. Ledding.
Merci, Madame Primas, and I want to welcome here today Mr. Linz. Also, it seems to me that just as with the energy crisis, we should take a close look at why we have the demand that we have. The war in Ukraine has given us all a wake-up call. And now we must be prepared to rethink all of our systems, including our food supply systems. While the European Union has been exceptionally successful at producing food for its own needs and for export, it has done so at significant cost, particularly to our local ecosystems, our rivers, our biodiversity, and indeed our climate. We heard earlier that biofuels will form part of the energy solution, but we have to be mindful both of the local impact of accelerating ambition in this area, but also the impact on food security of converting land that would otherwise be used for producing food. It is not that many years ago that most of our food was produced locally. In my grandparents' time, the supply chain was short. It was not perfect. It meant that there was less choice and there was vulnerability to crop failures. But it is also true that the system we have embraced has created vast problems also. Is there a merit in reverting to a system based primarily around locally produced food? I say this as somebody who comes from Ireland, which has a very large food industry. We export 90% of our produce. So what I am suggesting as a possible strategy would be a challenge for us indeed. But we are in exceptional times and all options should be considered. I am not an expert, I don't proclaim to be, and I would welcome the comments of Mr. Linz. I also think that we should think carefully about the call from our colleagues from, I think it was Latvia at the beginning of the session. Decisions that are taken now with respect to the conflict in Ukraine will determine just how serious the food security issue is to become. I welcome further comments on that issue. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ledding. The floor goes to Mr. Lorenzo Viviani from the Chamber of Deputies, Italy, and then to Mr. Kolucic. Thank you, Madam Chair. And of course, I'd like to greet my colleagues. Also, congratulations. It's really nice to see each other again, and it's important to meet on these themes, which are not just important. The tragedy and the madness of war, unfortunately, has revealed the weakness of the European system in Europe, and weaknesses which seem almost obvious, but the Green New Deal and the Farm to Fork, these have never been brought into question, but now, of course, they need to be reviewed, not only reviewed, and I'm referring to the introductory words of President Linz from the Agricultural Committee. So if we are to produce, we need to produce with respect to the environment. These are not incompatible. This has to be a concept that we need to integrate. We have to support those people who have protested against the European Union, like farmers and fishermen. So we have to. We need to find, first of all and foremost, a solution to the conflict in Ukraine. But we need to push the European system forward, and we need to develop fishing policies and agricultural policies, which. For these sectors, but which are sectors of excellency. So, and also we had this idea of reciprocity. Too often our fishermen and our farmers have been undermined. So, in various countries, and they've been able to deal with products that were imported that didn't respect any of our rules. And so, on our tables, we had products that came from other sides of the world, whereas our fishermen were required and to respect certain conditions that were respected by these products. So the weaknesses of Europe, this has to allow us to move forward and be stronger, to have national strategic plans, and we need to reinvest and give more space to agriculture. So this is very important. We need to find the right mindset and also perhaps pool our efforts. We can't produce everything everywhere, but in times of need, as we've seen, we have to pool our efforts and guarantee the support for farming and our companies. So this is what Europe should be focused on. Europe that is not afraid to produce and is not afraid of not achieving major growth, but we need to respect the environment. These are the principles that we need to progress on. So this madness of war has allowed us to see how the different paradigms that we use to define the agricultural policy, how they've been undermined. And I'd like to conclude by saying that in terms of agriculture, these will be very difficult times. You can't just review or redo a system in a short time. But we need to exchange ideas between the member states. So this is just the beginning, and it needs to be continued. So thank you for this opportunity.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Viviana. So we have finished with the list of speakers, and I would now ask Norbert Linz to respond to the different questions raised and different presentations.
Ja, vielen herzlichen Dank.
Well, thank you very much to everybody for your questions, your comments. I will try and respond in detail to some of them. What's important in the current context is that we make the right decisions now. Some of them will be ad hoc necessarily, where upheavals are threatening on the agricultural markets. And I think in the next few weeks we should keep all options on the table, whether we come to fertilizers. If the prices evolve in one direction, and this is just pure speculation, of course, then we could have to take government action, offering government guarantees to or mandate companies to produce fertilizer in order that we can continue fertilizing the land and get a decent harvest this year. That option should be on the table should it be necessary. The situation we are in is one that is virtually unprecedented since the beginnings of the CAP. and such extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. We therefore need to be in a position to act quickly if need be. I hope that this week and at the Agricultural Ministers' Council meeting next Monday, at the very latest, the Commission will have put together a comprehensive package of potential measures. I've described briefly what my committee has been doing over the last few weeks, and I highlighted some of the points we've asked the Commission to address. Ms. Kelly-Jury talked about labelling. Now, there are various proposals there concerning labelling. I know that in Italy, the Nutri-score is one subject which is criticised. You're not all wrong in criticising it. There's plenty of. The question is then how we order things after that and how we classify them. I mean, pretty much all our Italian colleagues, whichever parliamentary faction they are in, have nonetheless taken the floor in my committee to make that point forcefully over the last few months. Maybe threshold values for energy prices would be necessary. Again, as I said, we're in a situation where we do need to be able to respond very quickly. Maybe intervene more deeply in the markets than we would do in normal times. Our Croatian colleague, I'm looking around for you. So I've found you now. Yes, you have to respond to our Croatian colleague, who said clearly, if we look at the strategy in the Green Deal, there are many good ideas in that. And our Irish colleague also referred to that we used to have shorter supply chains, lower food miles, and so it's not that everything has got better over the last few decades. We are we have situations in the EU where there are regions where maybe they're producing a bit too much. And maybe there are a few too many animals in a particular region, which may be small. But then there are also regions within the EU where there aren't enough. There isn't enough livestock. There isn't enough level of self-sufficiency, under 30, sometimes under 20% for essential foodstuff. So there's a rebalancing that needs to take place, and we need to look at that more closely within the EU. And also, that's also the right path. I mean, it's not necessarily shorter isn't always better, but when we can manage that, why not? Where I'm from, pretty much every few weeks, an abattoir closes. I'm not sure that's the best way of improving things, to have animals being transported for longer distances to be slaughtered in mega abattoirs, a smaller number thereof. No, I think if animal welfare as much as anything else, lower food miles and a large number of smaller abattoirs perhaps is better. Again, short distances. Our Italian colleague said, as you did, Madam Speaker, this principle of reciprocity is an important one, which we need to try and include in trade treaties. But we need to ensure that we don't strangulate or kill off trade. It's not simply we need to avoid a race to the bottom. That's much as accepted. We need to be pulling standards up. It should be a race to the top when it comes to standards. That needs to be clearly included in our trade treaties, so that there is this principle of reciprocity to drag the standards up overall, and certainly not down. Turn to you now, Mr. Montaugé. Mr. Montaugé from France. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but I think that with the CAP, in particular in my committee, there have been many different opinions presented as to what the future of the CAP should look like. But I think in terms of the first and second pillars, the direct payments should continue. There's definitely consensus in favour of that, as well as strengthening investments in the second pillar. So during all those discussions, things like the environment, climate, and other and more resources for animal welfare. I think all of those are good points. And in the current situation, that those who were wrong, that's to say, who wanted to completely abolish the first pillar, I think it's become clear to us that that was the wrong approach. What we see as well, however, in my view, as a member of a particular party, a particular fraction, of course, I'm not speaking now in my capacity as the committee chairman, rather from my party's point of view. I think that sometimes the things we decided in the CAP earlier, which is now going to be enacted as of 2023, should nonetheless be road tested. So 4% of set aside, for example. I think that's something we could question. Does it need to happen from 2023? Should it be in force as of next year? As soon as that. And just to say, again, this is Norbert Lintz speaking, not the chairman of the Agricultural Committee. I don't want to say that's the majority view in my commission. It's my view. I think 2023, 2024 should be a transition period or a grace period for the set aside 4% because of the particular situation we're in. Now, a number of people have asked the question whether at European level should there not be some sort of fundamental basic support for agriculture in order to ensure security of supplies, food security across the EU. Now, and then more resources for obviously better animal welfare, better environmental protections, and so on. Given that the two are not mutually contradictory, they should not be played off against each other. Coming back to our Austrian colleague. Now, I think I alluded to some of what you said in my speech. That is to say, concerning the set aside, I think definitely for 2023, 2024, that was very much what I was alluding to, saying essentially the same as you. And the moral responsibility you mentioned vis-à-vis the world, yes, we are first and foremost responsible for ensuring security of supply in the EU, but in these extraordinary times, we're also a responsibility that goes beyond the EU. And that's one we need to live up to. Spanish colleague now also made a similar point, talking about set aside or fallow land. What I've tried to state is that our desire for better standards in trade treaties is important. But they need to be implemented not such as to choke off commerce or trade. I understand that you want to continue trading and that you're active on the international markets. It makes no sense to pursue the Trump path of action, where we simply try to impose tariffs and duties to try and kill trade. Otherwise, you end up with an Airbus-Boeing clash, where essentially it's the local people who suffer. There are job losses in Spain, Italy, France, and indeed in my country. I'm not sure that's the most successful way of doing things. I think I've tackled most of the points raised. I've done my best to do so in any case. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you for this lively discussion. Thanks.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, dear MPs, we are going to move to the conclusion of our work. I'm going to hand the floor to Mr. Julien Dive, who is the Vice Chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee of the National Assembly. You have the floor, Mr. Julien Dive.
Madame la Présidente, chère Sophie
Madam
Dumas,
Chair,
Monsieur le Président Lintz,
Yes,
chers collègues, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Chairman, Mr. Lintz, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of a very informative day of discussions on the strategic autonomy of the European Union. I would like to say a few words of conclusion and sketch out a few prospects for the future. We focused on the strategic autonomy in industrial production lines of the future. We can conclude that the difficulties in procurement for some raw materials and components as a result of the COVID epidemic have made economic strategic autonomy a major goal for the European Union. Economic sanctions decided upon by the EU in response to the Russian aggression against Ukraine raise with particular acuity the resurgence and the survival of European economies. So we must collectively consider, and do so urgently, consider how best to secure our value chains and our procurement and supply chains. I am convinced that this will continue to be a topic right through the end of the French presidency of the European Council. Now, the second topic today was energy autonomy. We must accelerate our energy transition towards the energy mix that will allow us to decrease our dependency on Russian hydrocarbons and improve our ability to ensure our energy security. This means that autonomy and efficiency go hand in hand. There is something that hasn't really been considered, hasn't been thought through. Our dependency on rare metals. We will in the future be importing more and more rare metals because they are an integral part of all of the component parts of renewable energy production. As the French president has underscored, and this was last Friday in Versailles, the European Union must quickly adopt a strategy in favor of securing its strategic metals to ensure an effective and successful energy transition, to meet its Fit for 55 targets, and in the process reduce its dependency on Russian hydrocarbons. This afternoon, we focused on the challenges of European food sovereignty, climate change, and the war in Ukraine, where the theater of operations has been focused on rapeseed farmlands and sunflower farmlands will, beyond a doubt, have a significant impact on the international food landscape, agri-food landscape. We must protect the European production potential. We have to stabilize world markets and ensure that those states that are highly dependent upon agriculture imports can continue to source what they require. We have to make this a political priority in order to become part of the solution to the subject of European food sovereignty. This is an economic requirement, but also an environmental protection requirement, because food sovereignty will make it possible to reduce our environmental impact and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as we cease hauling over Europe's roads the food that we consume in the far corners of the territory. The international crisis has been uppermost in our minds today and requires that we look squarely at the world of the future, which is full of hope and promise, but also contains different threats. We have to do our best to bring about the Europe of the future that we so ardently desire. Thank you very kindly for your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, dear MPs, Mr. Vice Chairman, dear colleagues, I believe our discussions have been extremely fruitful this afternoon and this morning. We have been able to confirm certain hypotheses. We've even thrown open new avenues to be explored. I'm thinking of the discussions on energy, discussion about the European electric power market, the proposal to eliminate the principle of the marginal cost, which will peg the cost, which pegs the cost of electric power to the price of gas, and has such an impact on agriculture because we have had to put some of the aspects of the farm-to-fork strategy on hold. We will certainly be exploring these avenues of the future and others in the months to come. It's a sign of how alive the spirit of parliamentarism is in Europe, that we have been able, in full respect of our different political affiliations, such burning topics and such critical topics for the future of Europe. It is very much to the credit of the European Union and its member states that we have been able to discuss these matters in such a civilized manner. Once again, Victor Hugo was right. Peace comes out of discussion and the confrontation of ideas. It is precisely in these times of threat and violence that we have to wager our future on collective intelligence. The myth that authoritarianism is effective, which is becoming a widespread conviction, we have to assert the superiority of parliamentary debate and parliamentary processes, not only from the standpoint of legitimacy, but also from the standpoint of effectiveness. National parliaments must have the ability to influence these solutions that we arrive at in striving for strategic economic autonomy, which is why I believe, ladies and gentlemen, dear MPs, I'm convinced that we must increase the opportunities to meet and discuss these matters. And I also believe that it is our duty to visit industrial sites, each and every one of us, to visit farms and visit energy production infrastructures in our respective countries. I think that we must also do more European benchmarking before we vote, which is the result of our discussions today and what they have inspired in me. The European Union law must not only be seen as a constraint for national parliaments, is also a process of co-construction. Now, conversely, the point of view of European institutions is that the principle of subsidiarity and the implication of national parliaments are not to be seen as needlessly time-consuming. These discussions are the guarantee of acceptance of our standards. I believe that in substance, the main learning this afternoon and this morning is that we must not address these matters in an ideological fashion. We are faced with the old dilemma, the choice between freedom and security. In one case, you take advantage of the potential of globalization, but you are made vulnerable to crises that can have unexpected and severe consequences. On the other case, you are self-limiting out of cautiousness to avoid those hiccups, and you have then to accept that your growth and innovation trajectory will be less buoyant. Thus, just as is the case with any dilemma, we must apply wisdom and a spirit of timeliness and appropriateness, and not hesitate to break with doctrines and strategies if they are no longer applicable, and always keep the lines of communication open between economic players, be they business operators or consumers, and this is a guarantee of pragmatism and a balanced view. After trade integration and the international division of productive processes of unprecedented extent, the challenge is not to deconstruct that which we have built so patiently and aim for chimerical self-sufficiency or reshoring in a systematic manner. It is clear that the open strategic autonomy is the absolute goal. It is a compromise which seems to be based on common sense and will be a sustainable solution when we have to withstand pendulum swings. This is an objective goal. We are learning to speak the language of power and have to be able to rely at the European Union on sufficient economic autonomy. And this is not yet the case, which is why we have to, dear colleagues, face the music, the strategies and European standards proposed by the European Commission in recent months and that are under discussion will be decisive in the years and decades to come, which is why the parliamentary dimension of the French presidency of the Council, European Council, the Senate and the National Assembly will work to make themselves heard regarding the lessons of our discussions. I am convinced that these conclusions are not the end of the debate, but will rather feed into further discussions. We will send you a full transcript of our discussions. Again, these are not conclusions in the traditional sense. These are meant to be the food for thought regarding our economic strategic autonomy. Thank you very kindly for your participation, and safe home to each and every one of you. Thank you very much for joining us. This hereby ends our meeting. Thank you.